The problem is how to transmit, how to communicate a certain message using those constraints. The problem is the web, mostly the web, smartphones, apps, and many other digital news have kind of mixed all of these ideas together, kind of brought more problems together, and the problems aren't constraints anymore. The thing is, when you're designing something for the web, you don't have a fixed size anymore. And I still have people on the first classes that I teach that ask, what is the size I should be designing for? What is the size of the canvas? What measures do I put here? And there's no answer anymore, right? Because probably there's not 2 or 3 phones with the same resolution in this room. All of them are different. And if you consider your laptops, there's also that, they're different. Not to mention that there's also desktops, even bigger. So all of these sizes mixed together. How can you possibly design something that is beautiful, that is elegant, that you know for sure that works, when all of the canvases are different? When you're not designing for one, but you're designing for hundreds or thousands of different sizes. And if any of you has done front-end development, you know how 1 pixel can do a difference, can make a difference in the size of the window. So that's one of the problems of digital design. And one of the things that I usually do when I'm teaching class is approach these problems. And there's always a few stories that I tell. I used to do a lot of freelancing back in 2006, 7, 8, around that time. And I remember I had a client who was a graphic designer. And she was designing this new brand and lots of pretty things for a company. And she decided that she was going to design the website as well. Because how hard can it be, right? And so she started designing it. And it was pretty good looking, wasn't that bad. Back in the day, there wasn't, responsive web design wasn't a thing yet, and so it wasn't that bad. There was, though, a few particular things that were bad. And back then, she gave me a PDF, and so I opened the PDF in Photoshop, and I started slicing things up. Who here remembers what is slicing things up? Not many. So you actually had to slice things in Photoshop and export bits of it, because the icons needed to be exported into a PNG or a JPEG. And the gradients needed to be cut into a JPEG, because then the browser would, turn it into a pattern. All of that is completely gone now. But at the time, I had to do the slices. First problem, the scale of the file. There was no scale. When you open the file, the PDF, in my Mac, I always have in the preview not just the plus and the minus on the zoom, but I usually replace that when I buy a new Mac with a plus, the minus, and the 100% zoom. And when you click that, the website wasn't like this, it was like this. Why? It had been exported in 300 dpi's, which is a standard for print. And so that doesn't work, obviously. But I didn't wanted to explain all of that and why you shouldn't do that, and I just, scale it down onto a size that I knew would be more or less the size of the website, based on the size of the font, the size of most of the text. And as it, it was in a very decent size, then I started slicing it up. And so imagine this website, very typical, with a header, a menu, and then it was a weird thing because it had an horizontal menu and then a vertical menu on the left side, 2 menus. So that was weird. But on this left menu, there was 4 buttons. It was the 4 areas of expertise of the company. And so imagine 4 buttons, and on each button you have a text, and you have an icon on the left of the text. So imagine, after scaling this down, imagine the button was, like this, like 1 finger. And it had a nice icon. And as I was slicing the icon, I realized that wait a minute, I can't understand what the icon is because I'd scale it down. And we weren't in vector land anymore. These were pixels, right? So imagine something like, I don't know, 20 pixels high and wide, and it was a blur, complete blur. So I went back to the PDF, and as I looked into the icon, and as you know in vectors, everything always looks great, no matter how small or big, always looks great. And as I looked into the icon had a circle, and inside the circle you had a hand, okay, 5 fingers. And then on the palm of the hand, you had a little house. And then the little house had a door and 2 windows. That was it. And you had to fit that in 20 pixels. Now I can assure you that even if the window itself was 1 pixel, the whole icon had to be at least 50 or 60 pixels. And so I told her, and I said, look, I'm trying to do this, this and that, and I need to do this because, and so I can't, just crop the icon, it's not working. What should we do? And I was thinking that maybe she would remove the icons or just, ignore it, or maybe even redesign it, find new icons. Or we can just make it bigger. And that was it. So the buttons were like this thick, this big. And so this is just a story of something that actually happened, that went through, and the website was launched using buttons this big and very complex icons of a circle, a hand, a house, a door, and 2 windows. But to me, this reflects something that it's not a problem that you can solve very easily, because it's something that comes from the background of the person. It comes from the mentality that she had in the moment she was designing. She had never faced such problem. And now, things are a lot easier. We don't need to slice gradients. We don't need to export PNGs of icons. We can just use SVGs. Everything is a lot simpler, technologically speaking. But the mentality of a designer needs to be different as well. And so this is just one of the many stories that happened in the past. And so as I introduce these things to my students, and most of my students, like Liliana here today, are graphic designers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, got it. Because I have others that aren't, so it was a slight possibility there. Good. Even if you weren't, you know what to say next time, right? So, one of the first things I usually say is I show them a chart comparing graphic design and digital design. And I was lucky enough to have started to learn design on my own, and always very digitally oriented. I learned to code, HTML by looking at other pages, by downloading the file, opening it in front page. Who here remembers front page? Nailed it. Opening it in front page, looking at the code, looking at the view, and understanding, just deleting things. What's this? Oh, it's important, let it be. What's this? Doesn't matter, delete it. And so, to me, this allowed me to deeply understand how the web works. And if there's one thing that I do after explaining them the difference between how to design in graphic and how to design in digital, after 10 years of doing the same thing, I started doing something completely different. And so my first exercise to them is not, let's think about UI design, let's think about UX, let's think about the importance, the really, really high topics of user experience and usability and all of that. Some people might say that's the most important thing. Well, it doesn't matter, that's not where I start. The first thing I do, and I did it 2 years in a row, and I think it went really well, right? Right? You hesitated?
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't go so well. But I think it did, which was I gave them an HTML exercise, first class, without many explanations of how HTML works. I show them a tag, I show them the syntax, how it opens, how it closes. I explain like 5, maybe 10 tags, how they work, semantically, what do they mean, and then I just throw them at the wolves, as I usually say. And I just go onto the whiteboard and draw a page with a header. It's centered in the browser. It has a header, 2 columns, a footer, and they need to create their first page presenting themselves to me. What is it they do? What do they like? What do they know how to do? Obviously put a picture in it so I can start memorizing their names. And that's their first page. And then they upload it into a server. They put it on our server. Everyone has a folder. And every time I need to check someone's work or just sometimes their name because I forget, it's there with their face on it. And they tell themselves in their own words what is it that they like to do. And it's quite frustrating, but it's the best way to learn. And I think that if there's one thing that I would like to pass on today is in digital, not all designers are the same, but in digital, people need to stop thinking about themselves as either developers or designers. Because everyone in this room, I'm pretty sure, if you fit in one of these 2 categories, you're problem solvers. That's what you are. And when you start thinking about design is not about making things pretty. It's not about painting pretty pictures. It's about solving problems. And if there's one thing that I usually pin my students to the wall with, is if you're designing a poster, how easy it is to read the poster from a certain distance. Have you thought about it? Because that's affordance. That's something that we need to consider in an interface. And so, one of the things that, this is one of the many things that bother me throughout the years. And so after 10 years of teaching in a traditional school at ESAD, I decided to open my own type of school, where maybe people don't need to have formal training in design to become good designers. Maybe what they need is to be good thinkers or great thinkers. Maybe what they need is to learn the hard skills on their own, as many of us did. Because back in my time, there were no web design courses or postgraduate courses or anything like that. I learned from my own. And that's maybe the best way to learn, because guess what? After you finish college, you're still going to have to learn things. You're still going to have to Google things and go on Stack Overflow and search for problems and go online and search for new tutorials. That's what you do. And so the new digital school is a project where we've put all of this together, where we're trying to basically close the gap between the industry, what happens out there, and what happens in school. And not just close the gap, but overlay the gap. Because why should you have your new designer in your company still having to learn a software, or maybe even how to think, or how to approach a problem? Those things should be addressed at school. And let me ask you another question by raise of hands. Who has had a degree in which you had at least one class that you have no idea what it was there for? I would actually raise like 3 hands. That happens. What we're trying to do here is trying to create thinkers, trying to create people that address problems. They don't just paint pretty pictures. Because it's more important to learn the soft skills. How to present your work, how to present your research, how to address an audience, how to defend your work, how to talk to a client, how to do an estimate, how to do a bunch of other things. So those things don't happen in traditional school, and that's why we decided to create something that I think is born in web culture, in digital culture, for real digital natives, as we usually call them. That's it. Thank you very much. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.